right now I would just say I'm evolving. But I'd also like to pinpoint this. I do believe that you may have to parent each child a little differently. You can call yourself, you want to call yourself whatever, but each seed is going to come in here and they're going to need something different. And they're going to be motivated by a different parent. So you may have to, like one child, you may have to be helicopter mom. I was helicopter mom for a long time. And that's just because my daughter, her brain works in a different way. And so she was not aware of safety and boundaries. I'm like, oh, I have to stay on top of you because it's life threatening if I don't.
You're listening to the Lifelong Learning Podcast with your hosts, Mama Kaiya and Mama Nika, from the Tribe Learning Co-op, an evolving village that supports families and finding their tribe through sharing resources and responsibilities. Journey with us as we explore what and how we learn with each other, our children, and ourselves. We and our guests will contribute to conversations around wellness through self-directed learning, parenting, sustainability, and community. If you've landed here, it's not a coincidence. What you're seeking is always seeking you too. We are so grateful for your presence, energizing the tribe.
Our
peace and welcome.
12th episode of the Lifelong Learning Podcast. And today we have a quick check-in about this show that we've just started watching. And it's been brought to our attention by some of our tribe members and a few other people who are in the community who felt like some of the conversations that we do have on our podcast and in our tribe chats kind of get at some of these topics that this show actually cover. And so the show that I'm referring to is called The Parent Test. And it's an ABC show. And it kind of chronicles the lives of 12 families who have different parenting styles. And it's called The Test because it's a competition of sorts. They get to kind of vote off the styles that, you know, they don't want to see more of and then keep the ones that they want to see more of. And that's kind of the premise. And in full transparency, I have not watched the full series, but because it came up a few times, I got curious. And so myself and Mama Kaiya have decided to embark on this journey of just seeing what it's all about. So we started our homework and we just wanted to kind of bring the conversation to the tribe to see what you all thought as well. So we'll just kind of jump right in and start sharing a little bit about our reflections or questions and whatever came up for us. And before I do that, I just wanted to kind of contextualize the show a little bit more for people who might not have seen it or who might be curious about checking it out. And so I'm taking this from like a post. You can Google the Parent Test review or reactions if you want. But basically, they kind of outline the different 12 parenting styles that will be depicted on the show. I've only been able to see 8 so far because of where I'm at in my viewing, but I wanted to outline them here just in case this information will kind of lead you into wanting to chime in or wanting to check out the show. So they have the disciplined style, and that focuses on creating a structure and a concept for quote unquote bad behavior. There's the traditional style, and that puts emphasis on age-old transition and places the parents as the authority figures. There's the intensive parenting style, and that one is education being intensely at the forefront. And natural style. And this style is relaxed parenting, and it focuses primarily on outdoor time. And the child-led style is taking cues from the children, and that's pretty much the center of this style. New age is empowering children through love while prioritizing fun. Routine style promotes security. At the heart of the style is structure. High achievement style is guiding and mentoring the child while expecting high results. The helicopter style, which many of us might be familiar with, it allows parents to supervise and set boundaries at all times. The free range style, it centers exploration and self-expression. The strict style, rules and discipline define it. And then the last one that they depict is the negotiation style, where parents tackle issues with the child through discussions and focus on the child's well-being. So just wanted to provide context for those styles in case we mention some of the ones that we have seen or mentioned them. Otherwise, maybe we've experienced them or you've experienced them in your own parenting journey. So I want to take a quick pause and just check in with Mama Kaiya. Like I said, we're both new to watching the show, but I wanted to check in to see, while watching what you have been able to see so far, if you had any like baseline or overall feedback or critiques or things that kind of jumped out to you.
Well, from a more macro lens, I think that it is ironic that they're highlighting so many different parenting styles to kind of identify like what is the best. And in that irony, you have people and parents and families that are advocating for us to be like less traditional and more relaxed, you know, such as like new age or child-led or natural, and maybe some of the other ones that I have yet to witness because I'm only on episode 1. But from what I see, those parents or those families are more on one side of the spectrum of like more relaxed. That's probably the best descriptor. And where it may be a little more egalitarian in their household, but yet and still, here's the irony. They're on a show to compete to see who has the best parenting style. So that was the first thing that stood out to me was competition it never leaves. Even when you are advocating for it to be a less competitive lifestyle, you're still competing in some kind of way because, you know, maybe just because of human nature, but you want your parenting style to be classified as the best. So you come on a show that you sit front and center and you're judged by millions of people based off of how you parent your children. And so that was just like a little chuckle to me. I was just like, oh goodness. Like, I know there's a lot of people who advocate against competitiveness and they're, you know, or some people think that it's not as healthy to like push children into that realm or into that direction. But yet and still, as adults, we still have that deeply ingrained into our lives, hence the show. And then it also made me think about like the motive behind the show. Like, what was the producers thinking and what are their intentions with, producing this type of TV show? Like, who's benefiting from having this imagery out here? Who's benefiting from magnifying the different parenting styles? And also, who is in authority to say what is a good, quote unquote, good parenting style and what is a bad one? And with all of that being said, is it possible to respect people's different cultural differences and the ways that they parent or decide to rear their children or just exist in their own family structure, and yet still have your own opinion about, you know, what may be the better style or the more, I would just say the better style for children in general. So, you know, it was just funny to me, like just it was just funny. And then they have a psychologist who's like the authority here. It's like, hey, I have this license to say what is good and what is bad. And I'm going to guide the discussion based off of, the tests that I give. So I'm sure that there is some implicit bias in there somewhere. And I'm sure that I'll see it more as I continue to watch it. But it's just funny when you start to view television, not from an entertainment lens, but more so from a programming lens. What is the program? What is it that you are trying to get the audience to see and to believe? And what do you want them to do with that information? And how is that going to benefit society as a whole? So those were my first thoughts as I was watching the show. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. When it came to the contest part of it, I was put off, honestly. I was feeling like when the first person brought it to my attention, I hadn't heard of it. And when they sent me like a little link or something and I saw contest, I was like, I would never watch this, never. It wasn't until like more people started kind of bringing it up. And I was like, well, let me just, kind of put down the barriers I have, the triggers that I have around this being a contest. And let me just, dive in a little bit to see what is actually there. And so what I kind of walked away from, having only watched 3 episodes now, is that contests sell. And I feel like on a primetime television station like ABC, if you are going to show some sort of social type of experimentation reality TV show on a station like ABC, you have to make it sellable. And I feel like contests are sellable, and speaking to like this programming that you talk about, is way easier for people to view something like this more in a consumption passive way if it's like a game. And I think about like some of the things that I actually enjoy watching, like that are around social commentary or identity. And I usually watch them online. Like Vice has like quite a few of them that I enjoy. But I realize that, that's why that happens online for people who are ready to engage in the depth. And it's not about jokes, and it's not about happy endings, and it's not about, the presentation of this being like fun or, reality based. And so that kind of stood out to me because it definitely has that ABC like corniness, if you will, which I feel like is such a disservice to what's actually possible. So having watched 3 episodes now, I definitely am drawn to the conversations, but you can tell that they're edited and so they get cut short. So I imagine that a lot of the conversations that got to be had when people are giving their feedback about, one of the challenges and somebody's parenting style and how they kind of handled that, they get cut off. And so as a viewer, I don't get the part that I'm actually interested in because I'm not interested in what style is the best. I'm actually interested in the conversations that come from people being able to like be so visible. Like parenting is vulnerable and it's so personal because we tend to parent either how we were parented, which gets at like a lot of our inner child stuff, or we parent how we weren't, which also gets at a lot of inner child stuff. And so it feels, at least to me, like when my parenting is viewed, I feel really exposed. And sometimes that feels okay, but at other times it doesn't. So to be able to have this, like, I don't know, I think one of the contestants said like, we're the experimental, the guinea pigs or something. Like we're the ones who are putting ourselves on display for the commentary. It felt brave, but scary because I feel like just like in a way, I think I am living a life where I am allowing for some of my more personal aspects of my parenting to be visible, but also like not on ABC TV. It's like a very, very small group of people. And so I just felt appreciative of that, but also disappointed that the part that I really wanted to connect with, which was that vulnerable part, the conversations, the feedback, that part was edited out. It was a few things here and there. And I can tell that it's because this is, they've got a limited time slot to air, and they're just trying to like kind of bring people's attention in. And it's perfect for people who watch reality TV and just want to like, kind of breeze through things. So that was something that stood out to me. Another thing that kind of caught my attention, and this is kind of rooted in a conversation we had before in a tribe chat, and it was around consent. And I realized like they're filming. So I don't know what happens in the future, but so far, on the third episode, no children are present on the show, but there's footage of the children. And you can tell that the children obviously know they're being filmed because there's a filming crew, present to film all of this. So it's not like, a spy camera or something. So the children know that it's happening. But in this age of like media being forever, being able to find images, videos on social media accounts or on the internet from articles, blog posts, you can find that well into the future. I'm just curious about how some of these more vulnerable moments where children are feeling challenged and feeling emotions, how growing up and maybe seeing that and seeing how their family is depicted, how that might have an impact. So that kind of stood out to me. And, I think about that for myself too. I'm just like, but the thing is, again, I feel like, yes, the internet is this wide place. I don't plan on being like a celebrity. I feel for people who like are celebrities and have any level of fame and visibility, because it's like you can't even be afforded the mistakes that the rest of us can make because people are going to go and look and try to find it. And so I feel like a certain layer of protection there, but at the same time, you just never know. Like, I'm really nervous about a lot of our technological advancements with the AI being able to mock your voice. And there's just so much like, my brain is doing that thing where you're trying to figure out an equation and you see all of the different things kind of happening. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. So I was just thinking about like those children and the levels and layers of consent that they have and have not given to, something so intimate being shown on, worldwide TV. So that was another thing. And something else that felt real ABC family about this whole thing was that, again, I don't know what I'm going to see. I've only seen 8 of the 12 parenting styles and families. But out of these 8 so far, these parents are like in alignment. And I think that's cool. But in my experience, and I've experienced a lot of families, including my own growing up, the family that I'm creating now with my children and my partner, and all the families of like the people that I've supported through birth and even into like, just child rearing. The reality is way more than even half. Like the parents don't align on everything. And I feel like that's really human. And that wasn't depicted here. So that was disappointing for me because I felt like another dose of reality and like vulnerability and realness that I would have appreciated and been more willing to like allow myself to truly be like engaged with this show and the content was taken because they made it seem like these families were just, they did have 2 single parents there. So they didn't have like that other person to, be in alignment with or not. And I don't know the stories of why, they are raising their children without another parent or another parent wasn't present on the show. But yeah, that just didn't seem real. That didn't seem real to me that, oh, y'all are just like, yeah, this is how we do everything. And I'm like, okay, ABC family is hell. But anyway, those are like my like first glance kind of takeaways, the things that kind of stood out for me. And it made me thinking about like, what would be my parenting style if I had to name my parenting style. And I was like, yeah, I probably have like the fuck around and find out parenting style, because it's hard to put a label on it. There were so many elements from how other people were parenting that I feel like I incorporate. And it's not really because I want to be related to or attached to any particular style, but more so I can see the value in handling a specific situation in this way. And so I liked that element of being able to kind of see, like, witness somebody's style and then have people be able to comment on it. Even people who had totally different styles were able to be like, I can see how that develops trust, or, how that works for your family. And, that makes me think, maybe if I would have had that as a kid, maybe this wouldn't have happened, so it's like seeing the similarity as opposed to the vast difference. But then also, it went the other way too, where people were like commenting saying, no, and what it sounded like happened there was this. And I felt like that's, again, like, we live in these nuclear family structures. We're not really visible and vulnerable. So we really don't want people telling us about what we're doing. But I do find value in somebody telling me, like, it sounds like your child is needing this. Because if I can't see it and I can't hear it, ultimately, I do want my child to be able to receive this and to not have to go without because I have blind spots. And so it feels valuable to have, maybe not strangers, but community members and people who care about us to actually be able to say, like, yeah, I see this dynamic here, and maybe this is something that you can pay attention to. So I appreciated that dynamic, and felt like if I had to pick a style, it would truly just be the fuck around and find out, because I feel kind of loose, like the natural and the free range. But there are other ways that I relate to my children, more so like, a helicopter parent would. And yeah, so it was hard for me to pick. So I just kind of was like, I'm going to just find out. I'm going to find out what works based on the situation. But what about you? Looking at those styles, was there anyone that was especially relevant or resonant? Or if you had to name your style, what would you name your style?
Well, in the first episode, they only showcased new age, intensive, routine, and natural. Those are the only four that they showed. So it brought up a lot for me. Like, I appreciated some of the vulnerability, although like you said, this is programming, this is ABC Family kind of TV show. So it's not reality, or maybe I should say it is reality TV in the way that we as Westerners experience reality TV, because it's not really real. It's highly edited. You're not getting full context. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of conversation, but you're only going to see, the most shocking pieces, or the most empathetic or gut wrenching, commentary. So, while I was watching this, I was very introspective in trying to determine, like, what do I relate to the most? And as a parent, I've only been a parent for about 6 years now. It's hard to just choose one. I've actually seen myself evolve from multiple styles, and I would not really classify myself in being one parenting style or using one parenting style more than others. I would say that the trajectory of my parenting style in general has changed based off of the needs of my children. So when I first started out, I would say I was more natural led, parenting style. I think that was more natural. So natural and these definitions that I'm going to say are based on what the contestants said out of their mouths. This is their definition. So natural was go at the child's pace because we don't want to overstress the kids. So that is their goal. That is why they chose to go with a more natural style. And I could say that is exactly how I started parenting my daughter. I would go at her pace. I didn't want to overstress her. So any situations that would increase her cortisol levels, I was avoiding until I could not avoid them anymore. And then it was just kind of like, okay, now I got to kind of get you to adapt. But I will say that when she became a toddler, I was more intensive. And that was always a goal of mine, like being just even being like a young woman and thinking forward about the type of parent that I wanted to be. I wanted to be an intensive parent. I wanted to make sure like I'm going to pour so much into you that you're going to be a high achiever. So I really resonated with the high achievement parenting style, which was the single father, I believe. I didn't see a partner up there. Even though he wasn't showcased, but he did give a lot of feedback. So I was able to kind of see like, oh, okay, from his perspective, this is what he was feeling. And I was able to relate with the intensive parenting style because that's kind of how I was with my daughter when I was just first raising her. I mean, we were ASL. She could say her alphabet, her numbers. She can do them in and out of order. And I'm talking 18 months to 2 years old. The girl was sharp. Okay. And so, and I was that parent that's like, we doing flashcards. Even if we driving somewhere or whatever, I got flashcards in my lap and I'm holding them up. What is this? What is this? Because, I'm like, this is time that we could be using. And she was not reluctant to it. She was open to it. She enjoyed it. So I'm like, this is perfect. It seemed very seamless and it flowed. So I really enjoyed that. But I've evolved and I'm still evolving. New age, I'm exploring the idea of like, do what they like, allowing them to do what they like to do in a safe manner. I'm exploring that idea, but more in the terms of like physically. Yes, I will allow you to do what you want to do physically to test your own physical endurance and strength and flexibility and skills, just doing it in a safe manner, but not so much when it comes down to anything else. And that's because my children have shown me signs of overindulgence. So then I kind of have to scale it back like, oh no, I can't be new age mom when it comes down to food. No, you cannot choose what you want to eat. Sorry.
Cake for breakfast.
Yeah. And that's where I'm more traditional. So I can see myself in so many different aspects or whatever, but right now I would just say I'm evolving. But I'd also like to pinpoint this. I do believe that you may have to parent each child a little differently. You can want to call yourself whatever, but each seed is going to come in here and they're going to need something different and they're going to be motivated by a different parent. So you may have to, like one child, you may have to be helicopter mom. I was helicopter mom for a long time. And that's just because my daughter, her brain works in a different way. And so she was not aware of safety and boundaries. I'm like, oh, I have to stay on top of you because it's life threatening if I don't.
Yeah.
But then I have another child and I'm just kind of like, you know what? I could be a little bit more natural led with you because you don't have the same, you don't have the same experiences as your sister. And I'm sure that that's going to change as the children develop. So I'm really open right now in figuring out how I need to maneuver to be the best version of a parent that I can be and to get the goals met, and I don't really want to box myself into anything, but yeah, it's it's very interesting. I have a lot of responses to some of these tests that they were running.
Right. That's going to be a whole different episode. So I definitely had some reactions, some triggers to some of that stuff too. And listening to you talk about your evolving style, I really like that name, by the way. It made me think about like another way to name my fuck around and find out style, maybe a little more concisely, is like responsive or maybe even self-directed. And I know that the way that we learn and that we kind of engage with education in my family is self-directed. And I feel like that's a good umbrella for like pretty much our parenting too, and so many other ways, you know, that we show up in life, I would say. And I think what I'm really drawn to in this self-directed way is you have the spaciousness to fuck around, learn, observe, and you brought up, you know, maybe having to do different things for different people in your family, and you respond accordingly. So that's kind of where the responsive title kind of comes in. It's like, okay, I'm responding to what is there. So it's not that I'm locking myself into any particular way of being. You know, there might be some dominant or some underlying energy that takes precedent in how we do things. But for the most part, it's about responding to what is present and what needs something new. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if there is some sort of communication or sign that we need to kind of move into this in a different way, it feels like, okay, we can respond. You know, we have that responsibility to be able to do so. So I really like I'm thinking about if we had our own version of this show and like being able to kind of name like evolving or responsive, and being able to see these ways of parenting that I think probably would encapsulate more of how people parent than these more rigid kind of boxes, of being able to see how we can be helicopter and intensive and free range and natural and all these things in one. And it all depends on the specific person, who we are in a moment, you know, because we change too, we grow. We're raising ourselves alongside these children, but then who our children are in any particular moment, and then what the environment that we're in, like what's happening in our lives, all those variables play into the way that we would show up to parenting. And so it feels really liberating to not have to be locked in. And it makes me just really grateful for like our ancestral rites of passage in the ways that maybe our foremothers and forefathers weren't really granted the spaciousness to be responsive, and they just had to stay in a rigid way of parenting for survival and safety. And I did see some of the vestiges of that come through, like some of the sharing, in particular, the melanated folks, but not even just them. Like so much of what we come to our parenting relationships with have to do with not only the lineage that we come from or the history of, you know, our parenting from child to being a parent ourselves, but also the context in the larger society, and like how whatever identities that are put upon us or that we embody also impact the ways that we feel we need to respond to our relationship to our children. So I was grateful that, you know, even with it being this, you know, kind of ABC vibe, that they at least touched on it. And I'm really interested to see how the rest of the episodes kind of progress as more families get to chime in around some of these other variables like identity and like family history.
Yeah, what you were saying really, it really alludes to how you said earlier, people that are on this show are going to they're going to reveal why they parent the way that they do, or why they even name it how they name it. And it's going to be based off of how they were parented or how they weren't parented. And just in that first episode, I was definitely able to see the difference. People, how they responded. I seen a father cry because in reaction or response to another parent using a certain word that just triggered him. It was like, I remember being called a loser, and I was, it was just so heartfelt to me, because it just really like put it all together. Like, some people are parenting through a very traumatic lens, and that may be why they went the whole opposite way. Like, okay, well, if I was raised in a very disciplinarian or strict or intense household where education or achievements was prioritized, I don't want my kids to be like that. I don't want my kids to feel how I felt, and sometimes people will just go the exact opposite way just because they're trying to avoid those feelings, which kind of made me think like, well, there must be there's some healing that could have gone on there, or that maybe has not gone on. Obviously, if you're still crying or still triggered by it, then that's a point where you can heal your inner child or heal your relationship with your parents, so that you could parent from a more balanced lens and not just be like rebel, because that was the main thing that I seen in a lot of the different parenting styles. I'm like, this looks like a rebellious child that's living inside of an adult's body. Like, I didn't like when my dad did this, or I wish I had a dad like that, or I was raised like this. I saw a lot of tears and a lot of emotion around regret and guilt and shame, and I think those feelings really encouraged those parenting styles that were probably vastly different than the way they were parented, which shame is a motivator. Is it the best motivator to use? Not always. So we can see that now. And the one thing I thought of was, these children will be a mirror. They will be a mirror to you. And I think the psychologist definitely hinted towards this. And he was just saying, like, yes challenge was the challenge that he was talking about. He's like, this really a test for the parents. I'm not even testing the child. I'm testing the parents to see, like, to see their resolve, to see if they can let go a little bit of control. And even in the high dive test, he was just saying, like, I'm testing the parents to see how they listen to the child and how they work with to get the desired result. And so, the name really, I would say the name of the show accurately describes what the show is about. It's testing the parents, not even necessarily the child. And if you really look at it, the child is going to give you feedback, especially in that yes challenge. I was looking like, oh, okay, when you give kids total free rein, you don't see what they've been really wanting to do. If you take away boundaries, all of the boundaries, they're going to show you what they've been wanting to do or what they've been wanting to communicate that your boundaries have not allowed them to communicate. And so I could really appreciate that. And I think that that's something that I would even incorporate into my own house. Not frequently, but just as a special treat or whatever, or maybe just for a small season, a small period of time. Like, you know what? Let's see how this works or whatever. I'm giving you free range to say or do as you please. I'm not going to say no. Let's see where this will go, and let me test and see where your mind is and see where our relationship is. So it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid, my uncle, my father's brother. Whenever we would visit, my cousins for the weekend or a spring break or Christmas break or something like that or whatever, like we would be at his house and all the cousins would get together. And when it was time to go home, everybody was disappointed. Kids don't never want to go home. They want the fun to just continue endlessly. and it's time to go home because, we got school. And so he knew that we were upset. We would be so mad and so angry at my mom because she was the person making us come home. And so if he was taking us home, he had a sunroof. And as we was driving on the E-way, he would be like, all right, let that shit out. Let it out. Whatever you got to say, it's all open. If you want to curse, whatever it is. Oh my God. So we said, we was just wowing. And it felt good.
I love this.
Girl, it felt good though to like have that safe space to be able to say what was on your mind, what you felt, or whatever, without like any repercussions. And then once we got home, it was over. Closed. Once the sunroof closed, that's it. All right, you got it out, let it go. And so it just kind of like made me think, like, how can I incorporate that in my home? Or how can I just allow my children to have that? Because it don't necessarily have to come from me. You can go to TT house. TT is the free range. You know what I'm saying? She gonna let you do what you need to do or whatever. She gonna let you talk your shit and all of that, or whatever. And I don't need to know about it unless it's something that's really like, she gonna come to me and be like, sis, hey, you need to probably do this instead or whatever. Or she revealed to me X, Y, and Z, and I think this can help. So I think, like you said or whatever, it would be nice to have that feedback from people that you trust that live within your community and that you give your children an outlet.
Yes. Oh, I love that story about your uncle. I'm just going to give him his props. Like, I feel like that's what uncles and aunties and older adults in the family or just friends of the family are for, because they don't have to carry and hold coherence for the entire parenting journey, but they can do their parts and give children outlets that otherwise, like, we wouldn't be able to, or we refuse to, or whatever the situation is. I feel like that also is something that I think is missing from like this view. So we're watching these families, but really it's just a nuclear family. And I didn't really hear people mention any other type of support system that they had, but I imagine that there are some, whether it's, chosen family, actual family, friends, community, I didn't hear much mention if it wasn't like someone talking about their experience with their parent. Mm-hmm. And it made me think about how so much of like what our children experience and how they express that is a reflection on only the parents, as if there isn't like this whole society and other people that are contributing to how a child is like coming into themselves and how they're expressing and existing. But when it comes to like ultimate responsibility, it's the parents, and it's kind of rooted in like legality. But if you like take that part away, you would see that there are so many influences on a person outside of just their parents. And something about like testing the parents felt like, well, yes, there's trauma, or, people are basing it off of how they've been parented or not parented. But also it's about like, what support do you have or not? Like, how resourced are you as a parental unit or as a parent that you get to parent in the way that you do? And it made me think about, I don't know if you and I were talking about this, or me and someone else, but like talking about privileged motherhood and like how there's this space where, some moms have the spaciousness to go slow and be immersed in nature and, do all of the things that they feel like would be supportive of their children's nervous system, spend a lot of time, extended breastfeeding and all the things. But then, there are some people who are under-resourced, whether it be financially or, having another parent or a partner or family around. So you might not be able to do that because you're spending your time at work, or you're spending your time like doing all of the household tasks and making all the decisions for yourself and for your children without someone else helping you. And it made me think about how those parents, they might be more exhausted and they are under-resourced. So they might show up to parenting a little more routine or a little more disciplined because there isn't the spaciousness to even explore these other ways of being in a relationship. So I was really thinking a lot about that, and like just your story with your uncle just made me feel like, yes, like this is what the village is for. And so when we talk about testing, you know, the parenting styles, I think that a variable that contributes to, you know, how we fare on this journey or this test is how resourced are we? And, you know, we would say, you know, children who learn like literacy skills early versus those who don't, and you go and put them in front of their 8th grade standardized test, it's like, who you think is going to do better? You know, so I think if we're contextualizing parenting in this way that they're presenting it, like there is a right way and a wrong way to this standard, then we also have to acknowledge that there are different levels of resource that parents have access to, and therefore that shows up in their parenting.
That is so true. And I'm glad you used the word privilege, because that was one of my notes that I put underneath the natural parents. When they were speaking, the first thing I thought of was, you have a very privileged life to be able to allow your child to go at their own pace. Now, I'm thinking personally in my own childhood and the resources that I had and the ones that I did not have. We didn't have the resources to attend private school, to have access to tutors, or I would say quality tutors. And I didn't grow up, although I grew up in a community, I didn't grow up in a very nuclear family. That was not my reality on a day-to-day basis. So my mom had to be more disciplined with us, more routine, more authoritative, more traditional, because of the lack of resources. It's like if you were, it's just like our society. It's a reflection of our society. If you want more freedom, you're going to have less safety. If you want more safety, there is going to need to be more control. So in the world, the way that we vote, our politics and things of that nature, if people are asking for more safety because there is some perceived danger or some perceived fear or war or something like that, there's going to be more restraints and control, or systems of control, because there are so many people. It is a lot easier if there is a small amount of people, because then they can really pretty much govern themselves. There is not a lot of interactions of toe stepping or people needed to be in a higher authority to be able to keep the peace. But if everybody wanted to do what they wanted to do, there's going to be more chaos. There's going to be more difficulties. There's going to be more challenges. There's going to be more problems. And so I think that is a very privileged lifestyle to live. But I think that there's room for people I think that there's room for everybody to use a piece of that natural-led parenting style, like go at the child's pace. Everybody could use that in the terms of not comparing your children to other children in all skills. Obviously, there is some sort of standard or spectrum, and it is good to have some type of idea of like where your child may fall, because then that can give you some guidance on, okay, my child may need a little bit more help in this area, or they may need they're more independent in this area based off of developmental skills and everything. But I think that we can all use that, but not on a day-to-day basis, and not everybody, especially because the way that they depicted it was like the lily white family, excuse me, living in the rural area on a farm. And the first thing I thought of was that seems nice. It seems like it's just so peaceful and natural, and we could just do this. I'm like, you own a farm. Although we know farmers don't make a lot of money, you have a large asset.
Yep.
You have a very large asset. You are claiming and owning land. And land ownership within itself is a hard challenge. It's hard to obtain it. And a lot of people were robbed of their land ownership. So exactly. You're sitting here living this dream as if it was just so easy to just do. A lot of us can't even just go and just live off the land or just live off grid or whatever without some type of intervention, without somebody else, directing us on how to live and what we have to do in order to live this way. So I see the privilege all up in there too.
Yeah.
But, on a more micro level, just between parent and child, I do like it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is definitely a lot of like access and privilege and resource triggers that came up for me watching that. And in some ways it was me like thinking about myself as a child and coming from a place of lack. Mm. And then thinking about myself as a parent and recognizing that, it's very easy to stay trapped in certain identities. And for me, like if I make it all about like, oh, do I have a ton of money? It's like the answer is no. But I got a lot of other stuff. Like I have a lot of time to spend with my children. Mm-hmm. I don't have to trade my hours for dollars. Mm-hmm. I get to be home with them and decide that I want to homeschool or unschool or not school at all. And I get to be present for all of the learning, even beyond like the schoolish stuff that we kind of equate with like raising up children and teaching them, but mm-hmm. teaching them about like their bodies and boundaries and emotions and how to care for themselves and care for others and care for the land and all of those things. I'm like taking stock and realizing like, damn, that's a lot of privilege that I have to just be able to do that. But because it's so easy to focus on the area that you don't have, like that lack part. And I'm like, as a kid, I didn't have this, this, and this, that I'm forgetting to also take into account that I have evolved. My circumstances and environment has evolved along with me. And there is so much privilege that I do have as I'm raising the children. So, so I would just say I was like deeply triggered. And sometimes that was like coming from the vantage point of me being a child, mm-hmm. but then also sometimes as a parent. And so I wanted to ask you before we kind of like, I'll say pause this conversation, because I think as we kind of watch the show more, mm-hmm. we might have more to talk about. Mm-hmm. And, there were a few things that were like mentioned in the previews, I guess, like the little trailers that hasn't like come to pass yet and where I'm at. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I can't wait till we get to those episodes. So I think we will have more to talk about. But before we pause, I wanted to ask you if there was anything that you kind of wrote down in your notes about like some of your own like triggers or activations, whether it be from the perspective of you as a child or you as a parent, just by watching these other families.
I wouldn't say that I was necessarily triggered by anything. There were just some things that just kind of came to my mind, and I just kind of like made a little mental note. So like the high dive test, he specifically said the test is he's testing emotional regulation, trust, and goal achievement. Those were the three things that he wanted to like observe with this test. And the new age parents, which by their definition, they said that they want to be flexible, do what they wanted to do in a safe manner, make sure life is fun and every experience is fun. One thing that I did make note of is they wouldn't push the kids. That's what they said. Like, I'm not going to push you. And they just accepted the fact that that if the child didn't want to jump, because that was the test, jump off the diving board, then that's cool. They was like, because if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, okay, cool. But the first thing that came to my mind was how quickly, which also editing, right? Because it might not have been quick. That could have been a whole 15-minute process. They could have talked them through it, but I was just like, so you just give up? Because it was literally like, I think they have a daughter. It was a daughter, and she was just like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And they're like, well, let's just see. No, I don't want to. They're like, okay, we're not going to make you. And it was just like, she was just like, no, I'm not doing it. And I was just like, ooh, okay. So it's like, as soon as it seems to me like as soon as the daughter faced or saw something that scared her, as soon as the fear was presented, she immediately avoided it and just said, okay, no, I know I have the option to not face that. And so I'm just going to leave. Mm-hmm. And it just made me think like, how is, and I'm using the word allow very loosely, because if she really didn't want to do it, you really couldn't make her unless you're going to push her or throw her in there or something.
Right.
But how is allowing her to like move through life like that? How is that going to help her in the future? Now, it's a twofold, you know. It helps her because she'll learn how to pivot, maybe. But in reality, right? Not in an idealistic world of what we want to see in the future and all that, but just in current reality, and from what I've seen in history, there are some things you are going to have to face. There are some things you are going to have to do, even if you don't like it, even if you are scared. There are some things that you cannot do, even if you want to. So it's something that I was wrestling and grappling with when it came down to desire. It's like the child had a desire, and her desire was to not do it. And although this isn't like an immediate dangerous situation, but as a human being and being a person or a human of habits, how is that helping the child if they develop a habit of quitting immediately? So that was like the first thing I made note. Like I know it's not always about quitting. Sometimes it's knowing when to quit. And that kind of shows like how well a person can pivot. But how is this child going to learn to adjust and pivot in life without succumbing to the fear immediately? And so like the helicopter parent was like, she was just like, I would have worked them up to it. So, okay, taking more steps or whatever, but obviously that is pushing, and that may be non-consensual to the child, because if they blatantly come out and say, I don't want to do it, then you are not respecting what they're saying if you are pushing them towards what they're already telling you that they don't want to do. But there's going to be a lot of things that they don't want to do. I don't want to eat that. I don't want to go here. I don't want to do work today. I don't want to do, you know. So it just kind of made me think about it like, this is why I still have room for being a traditional parent, or just, being a traditional parent, which is the parents are the authority figure in the home, because like the psychologist said, this is about emotional regulation, trust, and goal achievement. And I think sometimes we miss that last part, because what is the goal? Yes, I want you to be emotionally regulated. Yes, I want you to trust yourself, and I want you to trust me. But sometimes shit just has to get done. Sometimes the goal has to be achieved. If soldiers said, I didn't want to do it, I don't want to go, I don't want to do it, we wouldn't be protected. Sometimes things just have to be done, and the goal has to get done. I'm pretty sure that there are some parents who just don't want to go to work. I wake up some days and I just don't want to cook. I have to do what I have to do. The goal has to be achieved. You have to eat. I have to cook. We have to live. Husband has to go to work. So in my life, what I'm kind of like resonating with is, and I might have said this before on a podcast or just in general conversation, it is not so much about what I want or what the child wants. It is what is best for us as a unit. We are more connected as a family. We live here. We all impact each other. And what is going to be beneficial to us all. You are not bigger than the group. the group is not bigger than you. It's just about what can work cohesively so that our family unit can continue. Our legacy can continue. It's not a selfish act. So, eventually, like in my case, with my daughter, she's learning how to swim. You got to learn how to swim. And in the scale of priority level, learning how to swim is more important than you saying that you don't want to or that you're scared. Okay, I understand you're scared. I hear you. I'm glad you can identify your fears. And now I'm going to help you face your fears, even if you don't like how I'm doing it, or even if you don't appreciate it. You may appreciate it later on in life because it's a skill. You have to know how to swim. So that was just something. I wouldn't say it was a trigger, but it was just something I just kind of made note of. And then, like, as I was watching, I just kind of seen how like the reasons why the parents kind of like revealed like why they were doing it that way. And the dad said from his words, he's like, I grew up Christian, she grew up Muslim. And the mom said like, oh, well, I couldn't do nothing. I couldn't get tattoos. I couldn't do. So guess what? When I got grown, I did everything I couldn't do or whatever. I got all the piercings I wanted to get. I tattooed artwork on me or whatever. And then it just made me think like, oh, you haven't healed from what you couldn't do or whatever. So really, you just rebelling against your parents by totally taking another route with your kids, which that could be detrimental to your children because your motives aren't placed you have the best intentions, but your motives are coming from an unhealed place, from a traumatic place. This is a trauma response. So you don't have like a fully clear lens of like, what is the best approach overall? Because you're still like triggered. You're parenting in a very triggered way. So I understand why it's like, I'm not going to make you do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. Like, you probably were forced to do things that you didn't want to do while you were growing up. And that's probably why. So I get it. I totally understand that. But that's the reality of the world. We all are forced to do shit we don't want to do sometimes. And there are some things that we cannot do because we cannot impede on other people's rights and freedoms. So that's the reality. Now, maybe in the next universe or the next lifetime, maybe the rules will be different. But here on Earth, there is an equal and opposite reaction to everything that you do. And so you have to understand that and move accordingly.
Yeah, that's a lot for me. And I think a lot of that left me feeling really activated. Like when people were saying, oh, when I was a child this, I was a child that. So that informed how they parent, because I recognize that in myself, where a lot of how I show up to parenting has a lot to do with my current relationship with myself that was born out of not ever really having the spaciousness to even be in relationship to myself. So as it's like new for me, it feels like such a wonderful opportunity to then share this with my children. And so it feels like a lot of times it's in opposition to maybe ways that I was raised. And I can like cite that. But I think the reality is that because of how I was raised, I never got an opportunity to form authentic relationship to myself. So now that I do, I'm able to relate to my children in a way that does feel authentic, and also giving them the spaciousness to relate to themselves and not just what I say, which, was like my experience. And so what I was hearing from your example with the swimming, and the last example that you gave, I feel like a lot of the decisions that parents make, whether it's like rooted in family trauma or societal or whatever, is really rooted in survival. And so maybe what I think I need to survive is very different from what you or somebody else needs to survive. And I got to witness that with the families where, in particular, the Black families were very focused on like that intensity, the discipline, and being very authoritarian because they were associating their children being high achievers or basically exceeding standards and being at the top of every list with their ability to navigate the world and to survive. Like, really, that's a survival wound. And so even if it didn't come from how they were parented, this comes from like a more social dynamic of what it means to live in a body where your skin is dark and what it means to historically be affiliated with groups of people that have been displaced, murdered, and stripped of everything that is theirs, including land, language, and their own children and autonomy over their own bodies. So like all of that energy, even if you had like the bomb parents, you know, it's like if that is a part of the lineage that you're coming from, it seems like everybody is actually parenting from this traumatized perspective, because in particular, I say everybody, but not really, but in particular, if you are coming from a place where all of your relating to your child is rooted in the wound of survival. And I think, of course, we're like a species on the planet. So yes, survival is a part of our lives. And also there is like more spaceness to life than the mere specifics of survival. And there are people who are accessing that. There are species that are accessing the abundance of the water, the land, whatever it is. But as human beings, specifically ones who are living within this system, we are very traumatized for feeling that if we don't do X, Y, or Z, and we don't meet a standard and exceed the standard, that we will not be okay. And I feel like this really like reminds me of the conversation that we had about perfectionism and how we talked about some of the roots of perfectionism, specifically for melanated families, is rooted in like, will we survive and will our children survive? And I think sometimes we get so focused on that like, yes, we're not like living in chattel slavery, or we're not living in some of the circumstances that maybe we were before or that like ancestors were before. But then we are actually living in some form of slavery in another way. But because it's like this illusion of freedom, we feel like we're not still operating from the similar place of survival. So like the obsession of like having high achieving children for me, and this is just my vantage point, because I was a high achieving child and I like lived that life, the obsession of that to the point, like I'm trying to think of I think it was the intensive parents. Like they used a lot of language with the 6-year-old that was around being perfect, that was around like, I hear what you're talking about, but I don't care until we do this because this is what's important. And to me, what that does is that tells the child that they are not important. Like what's important is if you can meet this level, that's where your importance really lies. And then I feel like I see that in adults, like where people only feel like if I could be productive, if I could be on time, if I could have the best ideas, if I could have the most money, if I got, the cutest figure, or I know all of this, or, I'm not worthy to be kept as a significant other unless I'm cleaning house, I'm doing this, and like we internalize all of these ways of meeting a standard, but then we say like this is choice, when really it's, to me, it feels like just another branch of the same tree, which is obsession with being perfect and meeting standards so that you can be accepted, resourced and provided for, protected, loved. And there's something about that dynamic that like I really feel like I need to untangle, because like that is a deep activation for me, specifically with melanated people, but with everybody, because I mean, we all a part of the same fucked up system. But, it's kind of like around the, like I beat my kids' ass for their own good. That's like another big trigger for me. And that was one of the previews that they actually talked about, where people were like, yeah, I spanked my kids, and I saw them asking like, oh, who spanks your kids? And I'm sure people got all sorts of different reasons as to why, but in particular, whenever I think about the rationale of like, this is for your own good, like, because you have to do this, something about that feels like there is a survival wound that has not been dealt with, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm just thinking about this in response to, people parenting from trauma. Like sometimes it's very obvious because it's like, oh yeah, your mama did this, so you doing this. But sometimes it's not as obvious because it's more systemic, and it's more around like your relationship to a lineage of experiences, not just how you were parented, or current experiences that happen in our world that as a parent, you're aware of. You don't know how to specifically tell your child that this is a situation. So instead of like that communication happening gradually at a slow pace, the quick thing to do is to get you into gear and say, this is what you have to do. This is the standard you have to meet. And so I think that also, like, if this could be a spinoff, like if they could create a spinoff, I would love to watch that one and think about like, okay, beyond your mama and your daddy, like, let's really get into why as human beings, we do the things that we do and why we say we care about what we care about. Like, if everybody could be paid and resourced and have land, do we really still care about high achieving? Like,
right.
Because if we only care about that now because that's what's going to get us access to resource.
I was going to say it. I mean, this is the system that we're living in. Now, you know how they say you don't leave one job till you have another one lined up. Some people don't do that. Some people like, I feel like quitting today. I don't want to go to work or whatever. Oh, I'm tired of this job. I'm just going to quit. And then when something else comes. They don't mind being in the in-between. Mm-hmm. I feel like as melanated folks, indigenous folks, we have to have things lined up. It is very human. It is not even just human. It is very much so nature to want to survive, self-preservation. So you're going to do whatever you need to do to adapt and survive if you are an intelligent being, right? If you don't have any malfunctions or anything like that. But with that being said, we have to, like, I understand that some people have like what we call a survival wound. But I think that sometimes when we use that language, it can just take away or distract us from like the most basic human need, which is to survive, which is why we reproduce and do other things, like, which is why you can't hold your breath until you die, because your body gonna make you breathe. Like, there are some things that are just like very natural, but we do understand that we live in a system that has been man-made, man-created, and we're trying to actively get out of this system. We didn't consent to being in it, but we are in it. We're trying to actively get out of it. But until we can get out of it, how do we need to survive? And I think that in this particular example, the intensive parents understand that, okay, in this capitalistic system, or whatever you want to put the label as, whatever you want to call it, the people that survive are the people with access of resources. So I want my child to survive. I survived to the age that I'm at, and I decided to reproduce. So I want my legacy, my genes, my genetics to continue to reproduce. I have to put you in the best case scenario to be able to do that. And as we see in society, regardless of the reasons why, which are very valid, but not even going into the reasons why, the people who are at the bottom, right? If we are in a very pyramid type of society,
like a hierarchy.
Yes, the people who are at the bottom, they eat the shit. That's the real truth of the matter, or whatever. They have more stress-related illnesses. they have more complaints or different types of complaints that are all tied to survival versus the people who do have access to resources, money, opportunities, networking. And so my heart goes out to those intensive parents because I know that you're coming from a very logical place. You're coming from a very analytical place. Like, okay, X plus Y equals Z. This is what we got to do. You know what I'm saying? But I do know, like, there is fear behind that. And as a melanated person, we have not had the opportunities. We have not had many opportunities to be able to relax and not see through a lens of fear. And because we are actively at war, we have been at war for so many centuries. That's the baby in the background, y'all. I'm a parent, so. But we have been at war, and we are still at war. It doesn't matter how relaxed you think you are. Your enemy is studying you. You're not studying your enemy. They're studying you. They're trying to find ways to take you out, pretty much, to take something from you, to strip you. And history shows time after time after time again, when we relax, they advance. This is warfare. So I feel like sometimes I have these conversations about how we feel about things and what it means to be human and how to like keep our humanity intact without becoming or emulating AI or robots, or without like succumbing to these very like oppressive states of like survivalism and living in fear and like looking at things through trauma. But I feel like there has to be some type of study of warfare. Somebody has to be studying how this is going, because as we are trying to be relaxed, your enemy is steady building more and more tactics to use on you. We are living in modern warfare. We see what's happening with the derailment of chemicals in Ohio and lack of access to land or quality food or poisoning people through different medicines and psychological programming and psychological operations. So I feel for anybody who's going strong like that, because if you want to build strong people, you gotta be. This is that privilege I was talking about. We just can't go just live and frolic like hobbits in the Shire or whatever. We don't have that. I know, right? We don't have that privilege. You do that or whatever, and somebody come and release some nuclear like chemicals into your damn river or whatever, and it wiped your whole family out because you weren't aware, because you just. Please, can you leave for a minute, please? Because you decided that you just wanted to ignore what those people were doing that were purposefully intending on harming you. So like that, and that could be rooted in fear too or whatever, but rightfully so. If you study history, this is just what it is. This is what we've always experienced. And every time we get relaxed, they be 10 steps ahead of us. Every time you think, whew, okay, but we made it. I done heard folks say, we got a black president now. We done made it. I'm like, God damn it. Y'all just get relaxed over every little thing. You see something and it's like they just dangle the carrot in front of you or whatever. You have to stay sharp. You have to. And so I see why the intensive parent or the high achieving parent, I see the motivation behind it. Now, is that the best way to raise an emotionally regulated child? Probably not. Probably not. But, you know, I don't know. It's to be discovered and determined, I guess, whatever. We just,
Yeah, I like to say the proof is in the fruit. So that's like the only proof, is to see what happens on the individual level. And I think that you mentioned values. And I think that's also something that like these different parenting styles are rooted in, is like, what do you value? Mm-hmm. And I think that there were like I think there's a Mormon couple on there who like, you know, they're like, this is what we believe in, but also like, we're not saying that like other people's beliefs or what have you are wrong. And I know that a few people were triggered, like some people who like left church or whatever were triggered by it because what they know about Christians is that they're hella judgmental about other people. And so because that's what their experience of them was, they were expecting this family to be that way. But what it revealed for me is just that people's values really do feed into like what they believe. And then what they believe feeds into how they think. And then how they think feeds into how they act. And so it's really like you could follow the stream of consciousness. And so, like some people might value, I'll say like survival by any means necessary. Whereas some people might value having the best possible life while alive. And I think that there's like, I mean, like I have my personal preference, but I can honestly say that like, that's only rooted in my own experience, you know, like, so I can see how other people would feel like based off of their sense of value, like how they want to then, like, that's their jumping off point. Yep. And so then that informs a lot of parenting, you know, and this is a question that I've asked quite a few times in tribe chats and other places is like, what are you preparing your children for? That's going to let you know everything about how you parent, how you educate, because if you are, you know, preparing your children to be at the top of a pyramid or what have you, you're going to do certain things. Whereas if that's not your goal and you're aiming for maybe not even being in the pyramid, you know, you're going to do different things as well. And something that you said made me think about so for people who are like very high achieving, and I actually I thought the same thing. And I think this is how like we stay in these mindsets of like never resting. That's why people like say like it's revolutionary to like get your rest or to relax, because we prescribe to the idea that if we relax, then something bad is going to happen. And the reality is the people who relax the most are the people at the top of the pyramid. So like when we say like the people who are like high achieving, they're actually somewhere in the mid to bottom. But the people who are at the top are the billionaires and the people who do nothing but relax, create, have leisure, and they weren't the smartest or the best. You know, your Steve Jobs and all your people, your scientists, they weren't the best. They were just the ones who had the tools to capitalize. And so, what'd you say?
I was just gonna throw in there really quick. You have to also like look at that from a full spectrum. If they are at the top and they're allowed to like rest the most, that's what you were saying, right? Like the people at the top are the ones that get the most rest. Yeah.
Or they have the privilege of being able to. I don't know what they doing in their day-to-day life, but I'm saying they have the resource to relax. They're not stressed about survival.
It's because the high achievement came first. Even if they weren't the ones to do it, they're benefiting from like great grandfather or whomever. Even if, however, their grandparents or great grandparents or historians, even it doesn't really matter how they got the resources. They got them now so that their legacy can relax. You see what I'm saying? Like you work hard so that your kids don't have to work as hard. And I think that's why they're there. Like people who work a lot are people who are at the bottom, but they have to work a lot. And the way that they are working is never going to give them the privilege to relax or rest unless they just say, you know what, I'm going to change the way I kind of think about this and I'm going to make sure I get my rest. But we can't we can't throw away the fact that some of the people who are at the top, I'm not even going to say some, you don't get to the top without doing some type of hard work. Unless somebody did the hard work for you already and you were gifted it. You were gifted the benefits of it. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's not even, I'm not even putting any moral value on that. I'm just saying that's just the fact of the matter. Like, Steve Jobs might not have did all the work with Apple, but he was the brain behind it. He was the creator. He was the innovator. So he was the one who was like, find the right people to get the vision going and to be able to like manifest it. And he just reaped the benefits from it. Does that seem hella imbalanced? Yeah. But that's where the value was placed. And we as consumers and everybody with Apple phones and Apple computers still put the value there, which is why that he's gone now, but that's why some of those people who are at the top are where they are, because other people value them. They value what they brought or what they're bringing, and we're still using it. You see what I'm saying?
I do, but I don't think that you can take the moral out of it. Like,
yeah,
if you just talk about it in terms of like hierarchy, I feel like there's no evidence of hierarchy that is like human made, that is devoid of moral. You know, like, yeah, there might be some hierarchy in nature that just exists, but I would even say that, you know, it's more of a maybe a cycle or a web or some sort of interdependence in nature as opposed to hierarchy. But when you talk about hierarchy, to me, you can't talk about it without moral. So when I'm thinking about people saying that if I don't specifically, let me be clear, melanated people who are coming from lack of resource, when people prescribe to the idea that if I just keep working and I never take breaks and I never rest, then I'm going to be at the top with those people. To me, this is just a way for you to continue to stay right at that mid to bottom layer to continue feeding the people at top. Because like you said, the people at the top, they've been resourced in some way. So if you come in from nothing, but you prescribe to this idea that if I just keep doing this, I'm going to have something. And in particular, you're aiming towards the very pinnacle of a system that has oppressed you and put you in this situation. It feels like a misdirection of energy because you could just like pull out, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's like the place that a lot of people, especially people within our community who are, you know, schooling outside of the system, learning to grow food, like a lot of the ways that we are, you know, within our own wheelhouse or ability, trying to remember and take back and reclaim ways that we can be just a little bit less dependent upon the system. I'm not saying that this goes without work. I think when you know, people like essentialize terms like leisure and pleasure and relax, like that's not sitting in a hammock doing nothing. It just means that like allowing for your nervous system to not feel as if you're at real war when actually you're just like in the garden or you're just parenting, you know, but like we're literally living with a war inside of our nervous system when the reality is we're not on the front line. We're not, you know, particularly being like ran at with the machete. So being able to relax while you work and do whatever it is that you want to do in life and, you know, not feel this sense of like survival boiling in your veins, literally, to me feels like a very different thing than every single moment of the day, just going to work or constantly doing whatever it is that you do to like make ends meet. And on the inside, you're doing the thing that you say is going to get you this expansion that you're looking for. But you on the inside is like you're dying every day because you're being faced with this feeling of I will die if I don't. But that never goes away. To me, that feels like, a survival wound, because who's doing that? You know, it's not the people who are coming from resource. It's the people who are melanated, who look like us, who come from where we come from, whether from this land or some other land, who have gone through so many layers of being stripped of everything that is theirs, and now being thrown into a system that says, work hard, don't rest, don't relax, because if you don't, you won't survive. And really, the truth is, if you don't do that stuff, it's that the people at top won't survive. Because if we're not working hard to purchase all of their stuff and, you know, live on their grids or what have you, then they're going to crumble too. Like they're only as strong as the foundation. So I think when I'm like talking about being able to zoom out and look at these styles that are more focused on the system than the individual, it feels like the investment is in feeding the system than feeding the human, you know? And so we talk about evolution, like my perspective of evolution is not just like, okay, this is what we working with, so let's just try to get the best out of this. It's like to be able to pause and assess and say, what we've been doing is cancer. So if we're going to self-heal, we're going to have to like cut back and stop doing this and stop feeding this so that we can actually start growing in some other way. And I think that because obviously most of everything that we do is we won't always see the fruits in our lifetime. We go into like the fast mode. And so what I appreciate about like those, you know, natural paced people who are living, they are being so focused and intentional on what they actually can control, which is we can't control the whole system, but we can feed the individual that will choose to participate in it or not. And so that feels, at least for me, that feels more supportive of being able to feel in this life that I got, because I could die tomorrow. In this life that I got, it feels more supportive of my own nervous system and supporting my children's nervous system to be able to have choice. So they could choose. Do you want to feed the cancer? Go for it. But you know that there is some other option, which might mean that you're not sitting at the top shitting on other people. And perhaps they won't necessarily prescribe to that. And they also know that that doesn't mean that now you have to just settle for being at the bottom, being shat on, you know, like, but there's some other structure. So yeah, I think that we could definitely go really, really deep with this, but I'm appreciative that, you know, some of our tribe members have brought this to our attention because it does facilitate really, really good conversation that I think we have started to have and that I'm really looking forward to having more of. So thank you for watching with me. I hope that we can check in later after we watch the rest of the episode.
Yes. And I encourage you all to go watch it. You can go right online and watch it, or if you got Hulu, just go watch it. It's very interesting. I would say that it's very, very interesting. You might have to watch it a couple of times. Look at it from a micro lens, look at it from a macro lens. Yeah. So
yes. And if you think of anything, or if you've got further in your viewing than we have and something comes up that you especially want to talk about or that you want us to talk about, feel free to shoot us an email. You can follow us on our Instagram page at the Tribe Learning Coop, as well as Facebook. And we'll be posting this up on YouTube, and you can comment in the comment section. But also feel free, if there's more that you want to say than a comment can contain, you can send us an email at thetribelearningcoop@gmail.com. And we will check in with y'all soon.
All right.
Thanks for listening.